At the age of 28, I finally took a giant leap in my life. I bought my own house. For nearly a decade, I had shared apartments with roommates, and to step into a house of my own was like an enormity. Having a home where I could freely bask in the opulence of solitude was always a dream for me, and now it had come true. The home was in a quiet little town named Greenridge, which was 2 hours away from the enormous city where I had been living. Greenridge was more calm and quiet. It wasn't actually a country village, but the town was smaller and homes were broken up by chunks of woods and open fields. My new apartment, a small 2-bedroom, was located in the center of a forest, only a few miles from downtown. The trees that surrounded it gave it an almost secluded ambiance, just what I wanted. The day for moving came, and I was full of excitement and a touch of nervousness. I had rented a moving van for the day, so I didn't have any time to unpack. I dragged box after box into the house, piling the majority of them in the living room to sort through later. The hours passed quickly, and the sun began to set as I was nearing the end of the task. With only a few boxes left to carry in, I took a short moment to rest. As I retreated back outside, I was startled to find a man on my porch, standing in front of the front door. He appeared to be a late 40s or early 50s man, with an easy smile which didn't quite ring true with the abruptness of his arrival. My heart missed a beat, but I recovered quickly enough. The man said he was my neighbor, that he lived just through the woods. I nodded politely, yet something didn't feel right with the encounter. I didn't see or hear him approaching, which was strange given the long dirt driveway to my residence. The property on all sides was surrounded by woods, so his unexpected appearance was all the more bewildering. The stranger left following a brief exchange, vanishing into the woods. Pursuing the bizarre encounter, I finished off the unloading of the last boxes and locked up the house. On the way back into town, driving the rented van, I couldn't help but wonder about the man strolling off into the woods. There were no visible paths, and I hadn't noticed any other houses nearby. And yet, there he was, claiming that he was my neighbor. After dropping off the van and taking a cab home, I started to unpack despite feeling incredibly tired. As I was assembling my bed frame, I heard a sudden knock on the door. The sound startled me. There were no headlights or anyone knocking. I went slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. It was the same fellow, but he was different somehow. He was standing unnervingly close to the door, his body vibrating ever so slightly as though he were cold. His head was slanted at an angle to one side, but his eyes were resolutely glued onto the doorknob, as though willing the doorknob to turn. Then he spoke, an aggressive, demanding voice. "Hey, it's your neighbor. Open the door." His voice sent a shiver through me. I didn't say a word. I just sat there and continued to watch. His expression shifted from calm to obviously distressed. He rapped once again on the door, harder this time, then turned his face toward the black woods. Slowly, he raised a hand and made a strange wave of it, like he was calling someone, or something, into the woods. Suddenly, he sped into the forest, disappearing into the night. My fingers trembled as I locked all of the doors and windows. Panting, I called the local police department. When they arrived, they searched the grounds but were unable to locate the man. In the following days, I had the opportunity to meet the real neighbors, hoping to get more information about the mysterious guest. But none of them had seen or heard him before. Even the police were puzzled. To this day, the identity of that man and who or what he might have been sending a message to is still a mystery. As bad as the event was, it taught me never to neglect anything, especially when living in such a secluded area. Looking back, I'm glad that I never opened the door that night. Some mysteries, I believe, are best left unsolved. It was well past midnight, and the winding roads of Red Leaf Highway stretched out interminably before me. My eyelids felt like lead, with each blink lasting a bit longer than the last. The dashboard clock read 1:17 a.m., but I had been driving for over 15 hours, with only brief stops for gas and food. My relocation to the small town of Birch Hollow had been work-induced. a new job opportunity that left me too busy to visit the house before moving in. My arrival point was a few miles away, as the GPS showed, though every passing moment took what felt like an eternity. I finally turned off the highway and headed into town. It was too dark to see much, but what I could see did not inspire confidence. The streets were lined with faded, poorly lit storefronts, the kind that advertised family businesses rather than the sleek convenience I was used to. Most of the town seemed to be asleep, with only a few streetlights breaking the stillness of the night with a faint glow. By the time I reached the neighborhood, I was glad to find the homes were somewhat more ordinary. Small, identical houses lined the quiet cul-de-sac, their fronts decorated with neat lawns and narrow driveways. My new home was just like the others, a small single story with white siding and a small front porch. Exhaustion dulled curiosity as I pulled over to the curb and got out the key I'd gotten in the mail days earlier. I walked up to the front door and noticed the porch light was burned out. The key fit into the lock easily enough, but when I turned it, the door opened effortlessly. It had not been locked. I felt a shiver go down my back as I stepped inside. My things had been delivered that afternoon by the movers, and a glance around indicated all was well. Still, the thought that someone might have left the house open bothered me. There was no power, as I anticipated since I had not yet had a chance to get the utilities switched on. I relied on my phone's flashlight application to walk through the house. The living room and kitchen were functional but dated, with faded wallpaper and scuffed wood floors. Everything appeared normal downstairs, so I made my way up the groaning stairs to the second floor. A narrow hallway with 5 doors led up. I proceeded from room to room. They were all small and bare for the most part, with water-marked ceilings that wore the evidence of old leaks. The master bedroom was the exception. There, I found, illuminated by my flashlight's weak beam, one tarp on the floor. It was filthy, and while it seemed like the kind of thing movers might use to drape over furniture, the reality of it was odd to me. None of the rest of my belongings had been brought up. I stepped back out into the hall, suddenly feeling extremely weary. The peculiarity of the tarp and the open door would have to wait. Downstairs, I collapsed onto a plastic-draped armchair and closed my eyes. I wasn't sure if I'd fallen asleep or simply drifted into a trance, but a loud thud snapped me upright. It was upstairs, jarring and purposeful, breaking the heavy stillness. My heart pounding. I stood with phone flashlight at the ready and stepped toward the stairs. Peering up into the darkened hallway, I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to go no closer. But curiosity or denial pushed me on. Each step creaked underfoot as I ascended. At the top, my light settled on the master bedroom door at the end of the hall. It was ajar. In the gap between the door and the jamb, a figure was outlined, its eyes fixed directly on me. Panic took over. I spun around and ran downstairs, nearly falling. I reached the front door, opened it, and sprinted to my car. My hands shook as I locked the doors and grabbed my phone to call the police. I parked down the street a bit, where I could still view the house while I waited. Minutes seemed to pass like hours, but I observed no movement from within. When the officers arrived and cleared the house, they found no one. The back door, however, was wide open. It was probably the individual was squatting in the house during the time it was vacant, the police explained. They suspected the person had likely been hiding in the master bedroom earlier that evening, maybe behind the door or along the wall. The tarp had likely been their bedroll. The idea that I might have walked within inches of them sent shivers down my spine. The next morning, I phoned a locksmith and changed all the locks in the house. Even though the police said the intruder was likely gone for good, I spent my first week in Birch Hollow sleeping with the lights on, listening for anything unusual. It has been months now, and the fear has long since vanished, but the memory of that night lingers, a testament to how unsettling the unknown can be. I had relocated 4 years prior to a small house on the periphery of Willow Creek. It wasn't overly distant from my previous apartment, only a few miles, but the atmosphere was worlds different. Willow Creek was inexpensive to live in, but it did suffer from petty crime and an air of neglect. I did not have much option at the time. My finances were low, and I needed to get somewhere quickly. The house wasn't great, but I persuaded myself it would be fine. The day I moved in was peaceful, though lonely. The whole afternoon was spent hauling boxes out of the moving truck into the house. Nobody came by from the other houses, and I didn't notice anybody out and about, which was peculiar for a neighborhood of homes. The eerie silence was unsettling, but I attributed it to first-day jitters. On the second day, I started unpacking in earnest, moving furniture into the right rooms and opening up boxes. That is when I saw him, a guy, maybe in his late 20s, sitting at the end of my driveway. I thought at first that he could be a delivery guy or lost traveler, but he didn't move or shout out. Rather, he gazed at the house, then walked onto my lawn, cocking his head as if attempting to glimpse into the windows. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I stepped back from the window and down, determined to go confront him, but when I threw open the door, he was gone. The yard and driveway were vacant, and the street leading out beyond was quiet. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The experience stayed with me as I returned to unloading, but I dismissed it as nothing, a misunderstanding or perhaps just a curious passerby. Later, I spent part of the lunch hour dashing out for some grub before returning to finish up on the bedroom. I was spent by the evening. The house was still a mess, boxes strewn around and furniture partially assembled, but I simply could not keep going. I left everything alone, flipped off the lights, and collapsed into bed. Sleep came quickly, but not without some restlessness. I woke in the middle of the night to the softest sound of something moving across the floor, my heart pounding. I listened intently to hear it once more. It was muffled but distinct, and it was from downstairs. I sat up, not knowing if I was imagining things, and listened carefully. There it was again, quiet and deliberate. I got out of bed and slid my door open quietly. The hall was dark, and the house was still again. I crept up to the stairs top and leaned over. All was well where it was meant to be, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't by myself. Not using good sense, I crept down slowly, clutching my phone hard, its light trembling in my grasp. At the bottom of the stairs, I switched on the living room light. The scene was disturbing. All of the furniture and boxes that had lined the walls previously were now pulled out from the walls, exposing sections of the wall. My stomach fell when I noticed the ripped areas in the plaster, 4 or 5 of them, about fist-sized. They were not random. Someone had been searching for something. I froze, my heart racing, when there was a faint creak from the kitchen. My blood locked up. I whirled around towards the sound, my flashlight shaking as I cast it into the darkness. The kitchen door, which I had closed behind me, now opened a crack. A gust of cold air wafted through the opening. My instincts screamed for me to run, but I was locked in place. Summoning my bravery, I retreated and ran up to my bedroom and locked the door. From the safety of my closed door, I called the police, whispering as if somehow the intruder might be able to hear me. The operator reassured me that assistance was en route, but the minutes were dragging by and felt like an eternity. The house remained silent, yet every creak and groan sent me leaping. When the police arrived, they thoroughly searched the house from top to bottom. The back door was wide open, but there was no sign of any forced entry. They suspected that someone must have been squatting in the house before I moved in, perhaps utilizing the house as a temporary shelter. They pointed to the holes in the walls, speculating that the intruder must have been seeking something, money, something precious, or something kept long ago. But the creepiest morsel came when the officers walked through the master bedroom. There wasn't a crawl space, an attic, or hidden rooms. But as I thought back to that evening in my head, I remembered something terrible. When I initially took a look around upstairs, the master bedroom had a tarp on the floor but nothing else. The holes in the walls weren't there yet. Someone drilled them after I got to the house. I couldn't help but feel stalked for weeks. The sight of the man in the driveway was etched in my mind. Was he the intruder? What was he looking for? And why did he not take anything when he left? Even to this day, Years later, there's always that question at the back of my mind. What if he was not looking for something, but waiting to strike at the opportune moment?